I got to come out and visit him a lot. I love this state. It's got the best skiing in the world, the best snow in the world. We all know that. And I don't just say that when I'm in Utah. I say that when I'm in Colorado and everywhere else. And Governor Walker just told me that we're going to get the Olympics here in 2034. I'm very happy about that too. And I will be here for that, God willing. I'm very, very proud of Amaryllis, who is not only the campaign manager, but my daughter-in-law, and has had an incredible career serving our country and has devoted herself and her life's energy to ending the warfare state and the war machine. And I'm very, very proud of her. I was in San Francisco last month, and I was in, I spent almost a year, I spent the better part of a year in San Francisco in 2019, 2019, trying the Monsanto cases. So we had about 2,200 cases of mainly of home gardeners who had gotten non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from using Roundup. And the way the multi-district litigation works, there was a lot of other firms, about 4 other firms that also had their own cases. You consolidate all those cases and then you try them one at a time, usually in front of the same judge, although we switched judges, but we were trying them one at a time. We tried the first 3, the first one. Hello? By the way, if you can't hear me, because if I let me move back. If I drop this microphone so that you can't hear me, please raise your hand and it'll remind me to put it closer to my mouth. Can you guys hear me? Anyway, the first case, we won $289 million from the jury. The second case, we won $89 million. And the last case, we asked for $1 billion from the jury. It was a couple who they and their Labrador Retriever had they were spraying in the garden every day, and they'd take the dog with them. The husband and wife both got non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at the exact same time, and the dog got it the same time the dog died. We asked the jury for $1 billion, and they came back with $2.2 billion. And that's when Monsanto came to the table, and we ended up negotiating settlements for all the cases. Monsanto took glyphosate out of Roundup for home gardening. It's still on our food crops, and still farm workers are still being exposed. But home gardeners are not. But I spent a large part of that year in San Francisco, and every morning, and I'm being told to stand back here because the sound is better. Every morning, I would go to the gym in Union Square. Union Square in San Francisco is like Fifth Avenue in New York. It's where all the big shops, all the big American stores, Nordstrom's and Macy's and Bloomingdale's and Gap and Old Navy and Levi are there, and then all the big foreign brands like Gucci and De La Valle and Prada and Burberry and Ferragamo all have big flagship stores there. People come from all over the world to shop in Union Square. And I would go there every morning before court to go to the gym. And I went back there last month, and all of those stores are closed. It's just acre after acre of plywood. And they're closed because of the chaos on the streets in San Francisco now, because there's huge homeless population. And people are scared to go. People are worried about their safety. There's hygiene problems. There's all kinds of, it's not a pleasant place to go anymore. To me, it was heartbreaking. San Francisco is my favorite city. It's the most beautiful city in this country. And it's had its economic heart ripped out of it. And it made me curious about homelessness, which is an issue that I really didn't know much about, other than what we all kind of know about it. So I began researching the cause of homelessness. My son Connor introduced me to this writer called Matthew Desmond, who's written the seminal work on homelessness, which is called Evicted. But he's also done a lot of studies with the University of San Francisco, and they've actually gone out and interviewed thousands of homeless and given questionnaires to thousands of homeless people in San Francisco. My assumption was that homelessness was associated with drug addiction, that it was associated with mental illness and with high levels of poverty, but also that a lot of people in San Francisco who are homeless are imports. They're people who became homeless elsewhere, like New York or Detroit, and decided to spend their last couple of bucks going to San Francisco because it has a famously welcoming social service, very generous social service system. And also the weather is better than sleeping on the grates in the snow. That was my assumption. Also, people in San Francisco told me that in cities like Dallas and Austin, the police, when they arrested a homeless person, instead of putting them in the county jail, would get them a one-way ticket on the Greyhound to San Francisco. And I don't know if it's true or not. That's what a lot of people in San Francisco told me. So when I read Desmond's book and started looking at his videos and his podcast, it opened my eyes to a couple of things. One is what he shows is that homeless is a lot of, there's a lot of drug addiction among the homeless, but it's a very, very small percentage of the cause. There's much higher drug addiction rates in Detroit and West Virginia, and yet there is not a major homelessness problem in those states. California said we have 525,000 homeless in this country, and half of them are in California, so which only has 12% of the population. So what Desmond says is it's also, while a lot of homeless people become mentally ill, they don't start out that way. You become mentally ill when you spend, even after 3 days on the sidewalk, your psyche begins to deteriorate, and people become mentally ill when they're homeless. And also there's levels of extreme poverty in other places like Detroit and New York, and they don't have the problem. What he shows, the one correlation, and also what he found is the people who are homeless in San Francisco, almost all of them are from San Francisco. They didn't move there. And what he says is the single biggest correlate is housing prices. San Francisco has the highest housing price in the country. And California has the highest. Where I live in California, there's 7,000 homeless in LA, and the average price of a home is $800,000. So you need to make $250,000 to be able to live there, to be able to own a home. And what Desmond says is this epidemic of homelessness that is in California now is building like a tsunami, and it's going to sweep across this country, because the price of housing is going up so dramatically in this country. And 2 years ago, the price of an average home was $215,000. Today, it's $400,000. And the interest rates have gone from 3%, now they're approaching 8%, which means you're going to pay 10% or more. And, for my kids, I have 7 kids. My oldest son is in a home, who's Amarilla's his husband. The younger ones, who are all between 20 and 30, all have good jobs. They all went to the best schools, and none of their friends are considering buying a home because it's just out of reach for them. They're thinking of how to pay their student loans. So you have a whole generation of kids in this country for whom the American dream, for my generation, the central proposition of the fundamental proposition of the American dream was that if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, that you would be able to finance a home. You'd be able to take a summer vacation. You could raise a family. You could pay for your retirement on one job. There's nobody in that generation who believes that that promise is going to be kept to them. You have in about a month ago, in 2013, there was a poll taken of young people under 35. Amarilla said that, My poll numbers show me 10 points ahead in that generation, under 35. But I'm also winning under 45. I'm beating in a three-way race against Trump and Biden, I'm winning that generation. And it's because I care about these issues. I see what's happening. I have all these kids in that age cohort. And in 2013, there was a poll taken of American kids under 35 years old. And 85% of them said they were proud of the United States of America. The same poll taken last month showed that only 18% said they were proud of our country. So somehow during the terms of the last two presidents of the United States, this entire generation of Americans lost faith in our country, and most of them have lost hope for their own lives. They're the first generation in history that believes that their lives are going to be worse, that they're going to be worse off than their parents. And we have betrayed this generation. Our generation has betrayed this generation. We've told them, go to college, everything's going to be okay. Now they're sitting on these piles of debt with no way to pay it. And housing is completely out of reach for them. And, you know, we had a housing boom, and I grew up at a time that economists call the Great Prosperity. It was a 50-year period after World War II, when the American middle class became the greatest economic generator in the history of mankind. When I was 10 years old, my uncle was president. We owned in this country half the wealth on the face of the earth. We were the biggest exporter of goods in the world. Everybody wanted what we have. They wanted our blue jeans, they wanted our transistor radios, RCA Victrolas, American automobiles, everybody, and they wanted our moral authority. They wanted our leadership. And a lot of that was kicked off because we put an entire generation in homes immediately after World War II with the GI Bill and this other legislation that got an entire generation into homes. If you own a home, you care about your community. You care about your police. You go to the PTA meetings, the schools, the transportation. You care about the appearance of your home. You care about your neighbors. But more importantly, you have an entree to the capitalist system because you can borrow money. So if you have an entrepreneurial impulse, you can pursue it because you can take a second mortgage on your house and you can buy, you can invest in a restaurant or a bowling alley or a garage or a retail outlet. And that's what happened after World War II. You had a whole generation who were in houses and they made bets, and the American middle class became this extraordinary economic generator. Well, today we're going from a ownership society to a rental society. And that means that we're going from being citizens to being subjects. And why are housing prices so high? One of the reasons, of course, is inflation, which affects everything, because we spend $8 trillion on wars. We spent another about $8 trillion on COVID, so $16 trillion, for which we got nothing in return. And that's being paid for by the American middle class. And that's one issue, and that's affecting the price of everything, because they printed the money without asking permission, without levying taxes, because they didn't have the courage to come and say, we're going to raise your taxes to pay for this and that war. And the way they pay for it is through a hidden tax, a stealth tax called inflation, which lands on the middle class, people in fixed incomes. So everything is going up, but housing is going up more than anything. And why is that? Well, one of the reasons is there are three giant corporations, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. And those corporations own 89% of the S&P 500. So they own business in this country. And now they've decided that they want to own the residential housing, and particularly the single-family homes. BlackRock does not buy single-family homes, but it owns Blackstone. BlackRock and Vanguard own Blackstone. By the way, they all own each other, and Blackstone is buying the single-family home, so it's the instrument. through which BlackRock is the biggest corporation on earth, has $10 trillion under management. It's 3 times the state of California, the economy. It's the 3rd largest economy in the world. And they own, as I said, the business in this country, and now they're looking to buy the land, the agricultural land, and the residential housing. And corporations already own 6% of the housing in this country, and they're on a trajectory to own between 40 and 60% within 6 years. So all of you have this experience, or know people who've had this experience. They're about to go into escrow or sign a contract on a home, and at the last minute, somebody comes in with a cash offer 20% greater than the asking price and sweeps it off the table. And you have, and I'm gonna, and you ask, who is this who just took my home? And you look into it, and it's an LLC with an ambiguous name. And then you follow the breadcrumbs, and it traces back to Blackstone, State Street, and Vanguard. So, you know, I'm running against 2 presidents who are both running on a platform that they brought tremendous prosperity to this country. But I spend a lot of time sitting at kitchen tables with people and with regular Americans. I represent them in lawsuits. I've been campaigning for 6 months. I'm representing 1,000 families in Columbiana County in East Palestine, Ohio, whose lives were upended by the Norfolk. And I represent families in Ohio, West Virginia, all over this country who have been poisoned by DuPont, by all kinds of, by Monsanto, by other large corporations. So I sit at tables with people, and when you say, are you experiencing prosperity, they feel like they're being gaslighted. Today, the average income in this country is now 20%, is now $5,000 less than the cost of basic human needs of food, transportation, and housing. So how are Americans paying that $5,000 debt? And this isn't even good food. It's not like Whole Foods. It's like, it's what you buy in the grocery store where you have to eat 8 carrots today to get the same nutritional value as a carrot would give you, 15 years ago. And it's filled with atrazine and neonicotinoids and glyphosate and all these other poisons. So if you're living on the bare minimum and eating that kind of food, you still are $5,000 in debt at the end of the year. How are Americans handling that debt? They're putting it on their credit cards. And the credit card company is charging them 22% interest. I had a commercial fisherman, who's a buddy of mine, who sent me a screenshot the other day of a credit card bill. He's paying 37% interest. So if the mafia did that to you, it would be called loan sharking, and they'd go to prison. But if Visa, MasterCard, Wells Fargo, Chase, Citibank, and Morgan charge you that, it's just business as usual. And who do you think owns every one of those corporations? Right, BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. So they're doing it right in front of us. They're strip mining the wealth from the American public, and I'm talking to people who are making these ghastly choices today. Elderly people who are cutting their pill prescriptions in half to make it to the end of the week so they can buy food. Young mothers who are downgrading their ingredients in order to make it through the checkout line. A young guy who came up to me in New Hampshire recently who said, every Tuesday I have to make a choice between whether I'm going to have a meal that day or whether I'm going to fill my car up with gasoline. A young couple who talked to me about an argument they had sitting in their living room in a rental apartment they can no longer afford, with a baby crying on their lap and having to wonder whether the baby was $50 sick or $100 sick or $500 or $1,500 sick before they bring them to the emergency room. These are choices Americans shouldn't have to make. You remember during the pandemic, they shut down 3.3 million businesses. A lot of these are small businesses in our communities. a lot of those businesses will never reopen. 41% of black-owned businesses will never reopen. Many of these had generations of sweat equity and currency in them. But the one company that really did well was Amazon. So Amazon, I'm suing Amazon now and Elizabeth Warren because they censored a book that I wrote that was critical of the lockdowns. And it's not the Fauci book, it was another book that I did with Joe Mercola. And so they got to censor the critics of a policy that was making them rich. They got to shut down all their competitors. And we had 3.3 million competitors they closed down. And all of us got a 2-year lesson in how to learn how to use Amazon. So I didn't know how to use Amazon prior to COVID. And it's a magical experience. You just find a picture of something that you want and you push send and it's in your driveway in 24 hours. So yeah, it's very, very seductive, but there's a cause to it. Because that local retailer, you were paying a little more and it was less convenient. But he's gone now, and he was paying local taxes in this community. He was the guy with the plaque on his wall of gratitude from the local Boy Scout troop. He was the guy for me, the local retailers where I live in Mount Kisco. New York were paying for my kids' hockey jerseys. They were paying for their Little League uniforms. They were the places where, they would give my boys and girls a summer job when they were kids. And they're gone now. And they were paying local taxes. Amazon's not paying any taxes locally. At least they're paying federal taxes, right? No. Last year, they paid 0. So they're doing it right in front of us. They're strip mining the wealth from the American public, from the American middle class. They're strip mining, sending our equity. During COVID, we created a billionaire a day, President Biden and President Trump, 500 days, a billionaire a day, 500 new billionaires. And we shifted $4 trillion north from the American middle class to this new oligarchy of billionaires. And, and we still have plenty to send away to the war. In March of 2022, we committed $113 billion to the Ukraine war. This is a war that should have never happened. It's a war over us wanting to extend NATO into Ukraine. The Russians tried to settle it twice with extremely beneficial terms to us and Ukraine. And we made Zelensky, we sent, Joe Biden sent Boris Johnson over there and made Zelensky tear up the agreement. The Russians were pulling their troops out already. And the chief negotiator for Ukraine came clean that we already knew this because we knew it from the prime ministers of Turkey and Israel who presided over the negotiations. But this week, the primary negotiator for Ukraine came out and said, yeah, that's true. They made us tear up that agreement. So that was a war that shouldn't have happened. Well, and we committed in March of 2022 $113 billion to Ukraine. And that same month, and by the way, the entire budget, annual budget for EPA is $12 billion a year. So that's all we got for the environment in this country. So we committed more than 10 times that in a single month. And then since there, we committed another $24 billion, and President Biden is asking for $61 billion right now, $200 billion. So that same month, we cut food stamps for 30 million Americans from $283 a month to $23 a month. Try feeding yourself on that. We cut Medicare that month to 15 million Americans. And that same month, the Fed printed $300 billion, twice what we're giving Ukraine, unanticipated to bail out the Silicon Valley Bank. So when the bankers needed And when the military contractors need it, the door to the safe is wide open. But when Americans are hungry, when they're sick, when they're troubled in their lives, the door is shut to them for regular Americans. And that month, Mitch McConnell was asked on national TV, because Republicans are supposed to care about the budget deficit. Mitch McConnell was asked by a reporter, can we really afford this? We got a $33 trillion deficit now, debt, national debt, and we're passing on to your generation. And he said, well, don't worry, because it's not really a gift to the Ukraine. It's going to US military contractors. Oh, it's going to Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and Lockheed. Who do you think owns every one of those companies? Right, BlackRock. And then Tim Scott, during the last Republican debate, not this one, the one before it, they were asked by a reporter, all the Republicans, with the exception of Vivek, God bless him, who was saying, maybe we don't have unlimited money to spend on foreign